Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of The Only Ways Ethics with myself, Dean Mawson, and Happy New Year to everyone. This is our first episode of 2025, and with that I'd like to welcome Catherine Corbett. Catherine, thank you ever so much for taking the time to do this episode with us, and we'll be handing over to you shortly. And just to let everybody know, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify. So if this is your first episode, you can go and subscribe to those channels. But Catherine, I'll hand over to you so you can give us a bit about your background into sort of digital health and your journey into digital health. And I know we've got some really good subjects that we want to discuss as well as part of this episode.
Thanks, Dean, and thanks for inviting me along. It's great to be given the platform to be able to discuss, my experience, not only in transformation but also clinical safety. So, yeah, I'm a nurse. I'm a registered general nurse for the last 20 years. I worked in Ireland, and got some itchy feet, and moved abroad to the Middle East. I worked in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia, and in the UK, mainly in nursing management. Did dabble in education, but found that didn't challenge me enough. So went back to management for my sins. And when I came back to the UK in 2016, the hospital I was working at was chosen as the pilot site for its digital transformation, or EPR, implementation. And I was working as a manager overseeing pre-op and outpatients at that time. So I really enjoyed the transformation, and obviously the benefits that the EPR brought, not only to my areas, my staff, but ultimately patients, in regards to efficiency improvements, definitely safety improvements, visibility, legibility of clinical information as well. And the train was only starting to run, I suppose, in that organisation. And I was really, I suppose, inspired and motivated by what the EPR could do, and the improvements that it could, give both to our end users and to patients. That they were looking for people with experience, clinical experience, and implementation experience as well to join the project. So I took the leap over to what they sometimes call the dark side, from the comfort of our clinical environment, over to the world of health informatics and the world of projects as well. And that was back in 2018. So that's the area I've been working in. Since then, we started out as a very small team, which grew, and then I suppose got smaller through COVID, paused, and then we started again after COVID. But yeah, I'd say to anybody, who has an opportunity or has an interest, and definitely it is scary. But be brave. It opens so many doors, so many opportunities. You gain so many skills and insights, and it's really, I think, a privileged position to be in, to really, I suppose, influence the change and the positive effects of what digital transformation can do for, ultimately for our patients and for our organisation and for, our clinicians and non-clinical staff as well.
Oh, thank you for that, Catherine. And I think you're right. We are in a privileged position, I think, working in digital health in relation to be able to support our colleagues, because I tend to sort of forget sometimes that at one time I was on the shop floor, and I was doing sort of nose to the grindstone, and sort of doing these 12-hour shifts, and sort of and being exposed to lots of different sort of different situations and scenarios. And with the advent of digital health now, we've got an opportunity, haven't we? And I know people say, yeah, but digital health has been around for many years. But it's rapidly increasing, and the acceleration of it is absolutely huge. Interestingly, you talking about sort of, your experience, not just in the UK, but also abroad. And what would your experiences, before we get on to like into the nitty gritty of talking about sort of like, the whole process of digital transformation and how your experiences, you talk about sort of Dubai, Saudi. What were your experiences over there, and how did that compare to sort of like the UK and even Ireland in relation to digital health? Were they more mature? Were they sort of like, whereabouts were they on the journey?
Yeah, so it varied a lot. I mean, I worked initially in private healthcare setting, and then I moved over to public, working at the trauma centre when I was in Dubai. So quite mixed in regards to starting out on paper, then moved over to using an EPR, and then back to paper. Then when I moved over to the trauma centre, then when I went then on to Saudi Arabia. So I think parts of that organisation I worked for were digital, so specialised areas, which, as we know, introduces a lot of risk when we're not using a single system within the organisation and for that patient journey. And use a system for medication, I suppose, dispensing administration called Pyxis as well, which was, quite advanced in the field at the time, but quite hybrid, I suppose, in that regard, in the surgical, ward setting, that we were, very paper-based, but receiving patients, I suppose, from maybe our emergency department who were on, had their journey to that point recorded on an EPR, which, nurses receiving them in the ward didn't have visibility of. So you didn't have that opportunity to see ahead, to see the condition of the patient, so on and so forth. And the same then likewise when we were receiving patients from ICU, that was also a separate system. So presented challenges which we, implemented a lot of checklists and safety mechanisms really to try and reduce that risk when receiving patients from both areas.
Oh, that's great. And so your journey then brings you over to sort of like the UK, and then sort of given the opportunity to sort of start looking at sort of digital transformation. And so had you had an interest in that sort of like previously, or sort of, what sort of, when those opportunities arose, was that something that you went sort of like head first into and was like, oh yeah, great new opportunity, or were you a bit sort of apprehensive in relation to that?
It was an interesting, I think, crossroads for me. I think at that point, because I felt, I think, quite motivated, quite energized. I really, I think being, say, head of department within a digital transformation project like that, I think you really need to maintain a lot of calmness throughout the storm, not only, for your direct staff, such as your nurses, your HCAs, your allied health colleagues as well, but also for your house doctors or your consultants, whatever setting, whether it be public or private that you're working in, to really be, really to listen to everybody, listening to their concerns about the upcoming change, for example. And, everybody is coming from a different place with different, levels of literacy and so on and so forth. But I think I'm really interested. I think any transformation, in no matter what industry you're working in, people are really at the heart of that change, and I think if we can really empower people and prepare them and bring them along that journey, I think is really there, a lot of the key success factors for me. But so I was thinking about that, I just felt really, we had, it isn't always an easy journey. It can sometimes, it can be difficult. But it's like anything, I think, in nursing, for example, you go in every day, you work hard and you're persistent, and you support people and try and be a role model, as best as you can, for your colleagues. But I think for me, I just really saw the benefits that it brought to my clinical areas and to the staff around us, and to the patients ultimately, that they weren't being asked the same questions over and over again. We could be prepared for, for their admissions, for their appointments, by looking at information ahead of time, which is legible. If patients are coming back post-op, for example, we can see, what medication they've been sent home on, what surgery they had, the instructions are very clear, and so on and so forth. It made us much more efficient. I really, really wanted to get on, really opened my eyes really, and, I was fascinated by, I suppose, what else we could do with the product, and, to really, I suppose, pay it forward to my colleagues really working in the organization and other sites as well, within those different fields. So there wasn't, I suppose, the opportunity arose for me to either go down that road. I was, I suppose, offered an opportunity to, I suppose, become the matron of that site. And for me, I suppose that was always what I had wanted to do, really, when I set out. But for me, it just didn't feel like the right time for me, and I wanted a change, and that really was pulling me in that direction of really wanting to make a positive change. Who knows, I could go back down the field of clinical management again, but I really felt that I could really make a difference through that role of health informatics, and, as I said, support colleagues through my experience of the implementation at the other sites. And we had at that time, and I suppose to date, nearly 40 hospitals to implement the EPR into. So, so a massive challenge, a massive task. But, I just felt really, really energized and positive about the benefits that the EPR was bringing, firsthand. And it was, the first site, but actually down the line, with your experience and input, and obviously the team will grow, is what you actually could do, down the line with the EPR, and how it can transform each of the organizations, or each of the hospitals and the organization.
I think that's really positive, isn't it? And that's one of the biggest, I think, the key things with implementations. It's not necessarily what you can do up front, but don't get me wrong, there's absolutely quick wins, isn't there? And there's the benefits up front can make a massive difference. But it's that long-term benefits, isn't it? It's the long-term relationship as well, and that's really important, isn't it? And making sure that you're bringing everyone with you on that journey, because, like you say, it's all about the people, isn't it, in relation to that. And I think that's something that I don't know from your experiences, but obviously you're looking at it from that sort of the independent, the private sort of side, but from the NHS, something that's done. I think it's varied. The landscape's varied about how well that's actually done. In some organisations, it's done really well, and people come on board. But then in other organisations, it can be a real struggle to actually, and I know that from my sort of experiences from clinical risk management, but also from sort of the project side. It's sometimes you're in meetings and clinicians are non-existent. They're just not there. And we always use this, don't we? Oh, they're all so busy. But it's
absolutely.
But they're absolutely key to, if you don't have clinical input with your digital transformation projects, and that's, leads us on to that whole sort of preparing a site for something like that. How did you find that, the whole sort of clinical engagement, and do you it was there pushback in relation to people sort of we don't want this in, what we've got is sufficient, or we're happy with paper, and those sort of attitudes in relation to that, or that's the system's just going to slow me down, as you hear quite a lot?
And I think that they are they're very real. They're very real challenges, and I think again, you have to listen and be honest and open and transparent, with your colleagues at other hospitals. I think we're touching on it, and probably will touch on it. I'm a really firm believer that we have to invest upfront in people to do this right. I always, and more recently, I'm thinking around we all have seen what good looks like. We've all seen maybe what not so good looks like. But for me, I think it's, to really be successful with an implementation. And I think it's not just the implementation. It's not just the tick box of go live on the 1st of January, 2025, but it's actually everything after that. And it's a continuous process throughout the life cycle of that product. That I think, the organization itself from the very top right down through, your leadership have to buy in, have to invest, have to understand as well the benefits of why and the rationale of why we're doing this. I think in my experience, my first kind of big transformation, I think it's sometimes a little bit easier when you're moving from paper to digital rather than maybe a hybrid to digital, or to another full digital system over to another vendor and so on. So I think that helps a lot. It kind of is an easier project in a way, but I really do feel that the investment in people and the right people and clinicians, let's say clinicians from a clinical perspective, but the expertise from a clinical perspective, but also, it depends on your EPR, but if it's end-to-end EPR, you have to invest in your non-clinical, so your administrative staff as well, your expertise, your finance, your billing, and so on. And having the right people, having the right representation on your project team to be able to engage, with the hospital teams as well is so key. And I think I've worked in organizations or on digital transformation projects. We've had it, kind of different models almost to where you might have a single change lead, hospital change lead. But I think the key is no matter if you set it up as one person or a team of people, that actually it's that person who is the go-between between project and hospital, but who is familiar to that site. Because, I don't think there's anything more valuable than having somebody that is, familiar to the site. People are going to feel much more comfortable to engage, raise their concerns, raise their issues, be open, be transparent, be vulnerable, I think, as well, is a big key. Especially, I think, if you're coming to transform a hospital that's using paper to full digital, where people actually don't engage and use any technology when they're working on a day-to-day basis, no matter what their role is, whether it be, from a person working in a bookings office to a consultant, that actually, to give them, confidential safe space for them to open up and say, look, I am not trying to be resistant, but I do have a concern, and actually I do need some support now to be able to use this on day one, of go live. And I think it's really key to invest upfront in your resources and have somebody that is familiar to that hospital, because I think it just depends on what you're trying to do, when it comes to digital transformation. I think it's very key to have somebody eyes, ears on the ground, that know the staff, know where the challenges are, where the gaps are, where the good is, and so on. And for me, I think the approach is from the very start is getting leadership buy-in, getting them to understand, I think, how great the change is and how it will impact them, and how it will be a journey and a continuous journey as well. And we will bring them on that journey, and that it's not simply just putting your paper in the bin and turning on a computer. There's so much that we need to do in advance of preparing, your staff, and, and actually making it fun and making it an enjoyable experience, and, breaking down the fear, and, being, I suppose, as we're both nurses teams, so I think we all learn, don't we, by, I can talk and tell you about an EPR and about what, if you're a nurse working in the ward, for example, oh, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Admit a patient. Okay, this is what you will do. Actually, it's much more valuable if I can say to you, okay, Dean, I'm going to take you to the hospital where it's live at the moment. You're going to speak to your peers. They're going to show you the run through of an end-to-end journey, and people will come away and actually say, okay, do you know what? And they'll start to actually organically make changes themselves within their departments, and get rid of those little books that they have to record this and record that. And it's, I think that is the most powerful. That is, and that's not just a one-time thing. I think that needs to be done as early as we can, and obviously combined with foundation, role-based training, scenarios, simulations, and so on. And, downtime practicing their downtime processes, I think, is really key, and because that's a new concept, isn't it? As well, when you're digitally transforming from paper to an EPR, and giving them hands-on experience. Looking, I think, listening, and then feeling, getting their hands on devices, getting them confident using, whether it be mobile devices, cows or wows, and scanners, and printers, and barcode label scanners, and so on, and seeing labels, seeing what they have, and making the learning fun, really, and and letting them go back and start to put things in place before they go live, to kind of really make it as successful as possible. There's so much I could talk about, I think, but those for me are really people is at the heart of it.
Absolutely great, Catherine, and it starts, while you're talking, and it starts me getting thinking about, recent experiences for me. So, not so long ago in the summer, when you're talking about this preparation, and you're thinking about sort of exposing people to the technologies and the systems being used already in sort of like a live environment, and for them to go and get exposed to that, and and coming back to their own areas and saying, right, we need to do this, and we need to do that, and they're infused and they're sort of excited about it. And we did the paper picnic at Barkinghaven and Redbridge, and sort of and did that, and this big amnesty of sort of like and you see the reams and reams of paper that were just sort of like that were there. And I don't think people realise sometimes what the big ask in relation to that, and that if that preparation isn't done up front, then you're going to struggle, because if you're fighting with you're tackling all the sort of like the processes and the activities and around a go live, along with trying to then firefight for those areas that haven't prepared or maybe have been overlooked. We know this happens, don't we? Where I've known it. You switch on, like you go live, and then you get a disgruntled sort of like back office team that are like, no one's come to us, or no one's told us about this, that, and the other. And it's essential. It's absolutely, and some people may pay lip service to that. So, oh yeah, we'll get to them and we'll sort it out. And it's like, yeah, but if you get under the bonnet and actually do a deep dive into that, and actually say, well, actually, there's a huge impact on that. And then, with our clinical, our risk manager and hats on, if you risk assessed, there may be, potential clinical risk, etc., and all those sort of things that come in. And it's interesting you talking about sort of like people being exposed to. So I was, as recent as last week, I was a patient in an elective sort of scenario, and chatting to the staff there. And they're saying about, oh, we've got a new system, that's coming in, going live this year. They're completely, no one came near me with, the only bit of technology someone came near me with was a Dynamap, and everything was on paper. I was asked, God knows how many times, what allergies and everything that I was on, instead of being able to say, on a PDA or something, these are your
Just
allergies,
confirming.
are these still correct? Except I'm just confirming, rather than saying, what are all your allergies? Should have them tattooed on my forehead or something. And then chatting about their experience. And it was quite interesting, because the sort of ward manager there was saying, we asked to go and look at the system, keeping this sort of generic. We've been asked to go, we asked to go and look at the system being in live use within a sort of day surgery area, and we're told that we can't do that. And it was like, it just seemed a bit odd, and a bit sort of like, very, I was quite saddened actually by that it was like, that they're being told, no, you can't go and see it. and obviously my response was, you need to push back
Yeah.
completely,
Be
and then
persistent,
sort of
like we
be
are.
persistent,
Yeah.
and try and be sort of proactive, and really insist that that's what you do, because it's absolutely key, isn't it, in that preparation, but and within that planning.
Definitely. And I think, you've touched on that there, Dean, is okay, fine. Say we invest in a team of experienced clinicians that represent an area, nursing, allied health, lab, radiology, so on, that are working as part of, health informatics team. But, I think that they, again, are representative of the module within the system, but actually there should be that continuous, kind of closed loop with the end users always, as we design, and any, if you're preparing for the first time a hospital to go live, a lot of our EPRs are big, they're off the shelf, but you need to, you need to configure them a lot of the times, don't we? And, that brings its own challenges as well. But that constant, you cannot be an expert, and I knew that when I moved over in stuff, you can't be an expert in every field. So, you can create all of your user networks and literally opening it up to, all your colleagues within the organization, and as many people as possible, so they feel heard, they have input as well, and on that. And it's, as I said, a continuous, it's continuous throughout the life cycle of the product as well, constantly looking back and forward to guidance, to your, your central team, to governance, so on and so forth, to make sure that, what you have, your record, is evidence-based, has, and we're using the technology, we have inbuilt safety features, we have guidance there, we have tooltips, we have references using that EPR to its maximum capacity. So a nurse does not need to go away. We actually can inbuild something in there, or, work with your vendor to actually, put in some reference guidelines in there, around sepsis, for example, there are a lot of capabilities in there. And, that really encourages and drives forward standardization of care. Whether you're one organization or, you have 40 or 100, hospitals within your organization, or you're a big trust, for example, that it really does, these are all the wider, real rich benefits of an EPR, and whether it doesn't have it off the shelf, that, you can work with your vendor to develop, and use the technology as intended and much more as well, to really support our clinicians. So, that they're actually doing care at the bedside with the patients, and they have the tools at their fingertips to reference as needed using the technology.
And you're absolutely on point, because that it's those extra bits, isn't it? It's not just the sort of, what I see a lot of systems that get deployed, and people are generally ticking boxes to say, oh right, this piece of paper has been reflected in this system, or that piece of, right, yeah. So we're done, that's it, we're done now, and you can complete that assessment in that. And it's like, whoa, hang on, it's a whole clinical workflow, and it's a whole not just clinical, but clinical, non-clinical, it's a whole process. It's sort of like, almost like that adage of, don't treat the disease, treat the patient, be holistic in your approach, yeah. Rather than sort of tunnel vision in relation to that, which, brings us quite nicely onto, you spoke about safety features, and you spoke about evidence base, and, coming on to, the role of, we're both clinical safety officers, in our roles, and what we do. It's a huge part of it, and what we've spoken about up till now, it has a massive impact on the potential to cause harm to patients, especially, if you're, multiple sites across, you've 40 hospitals previously, and sort of, you work for a sort of like, a bigger group now as well. So your approach to sort of like clinical risk management, and I know we spoke about before we started the episode, it's like, you're in that situation now where you're working in Ireland, so you're not working under DCB 129 and 160, but you were previously in your previous role. So it's quite interesting that you've seen sort of like both sides of the fence in relation to that. So yeah, your involvement in relation to that, Catherine, and your experience in relation to the standards.
Yeah, so I suppose, as you said, this was there's two sides of the coin, isn't there? But they're quite similar in the standards and the requirements as well. You know, I first became aware quite early when I moved over from clinical over to health informatics and the requirement of a clinical safety officer. And that is something actually just kind of coming around full circle, and it is something that, you know, we really raised awareness about throughout our kind of, you know, pre-implementation phase to our you know, to our deploying sites, that there is a role does exist. There are standards behind there to ensure safety, you know, of the technology and of the product. So, you know, and that was, I think, quite eye-opening. We had a lot of interest and questions about that, but I would say roped in, and that's probably a lot of CSOs journey, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You're quite detailed orientated, quite process driven, quite pedantic maybe. But you know, there are job descriptions for CSOs for sure, but when it sometimes is a single role, and for me, I think, you know, with our experience to date, we probably would advocate that it is a single role, because it's massive, isn't it? And you know, we've spoken before, and you know, in all of your other episodes, I think we're firm believers in it is its own almost speciality, and we would love to see professional body regulation behind it, you know, and registration almost as well. We can speak about that a little bit later, but I suppose my journey, yeah, I was absolutely keen, you know, to ensure I was happy to go on to our training, a couple of days training, which I know a lot of the CSOs have attended, but can give you, I think, just a little kind of, it opens the door a little bit, but, you know, provides you a little bit of a theory behind it. But when you come out of the couple of days training, it absolutely, I don't think, prepares you for what you actually need to do in your role. And it is a little bit daunting on your kind of first day, even though it's not your sole job or role to do. But, you know, we all take it very, very seriously, hence why we're, you know, usually nominated for these roles as well. And it was really, I think, like nursing, it was an art and a science for me, that, you know, I tried to reach out and see, you know, what community was out there in regards to CSOs. I did have I was very, very lucky to have a mentor who had a lot of experience, and, you know, she became our CIO. So, you know, had to obviously have other responsibilities. So we needed a dedicated CSO. So I was lucky to have a mentor, you know, who I could, you know, go away, do some reading, do some research, speak with people. You know, I reached out to the NHS, to other CSOs as well, and kind of find very similar stories to myself, that there were a lot of people working in their day-to-day role with the CSO kind of add-on role as well, and looking to see what templates are out there as well in regards to, you know, creating our library, enhancing, reviewing our existing documentation, and, you know, really trying to enrich those and making sure we were compliant. And I'm really fortunate as well. I reached out to our supplier or vendor, CSO. They had a single CSO at the time, and I suppose from early 2018 up until when I left in the end of 2023, we really had a really strong network. So both the vendor and the manufacturer really, and the health organization, we came together, and I found that is really powerful. Because I think as a CSO, it is a lonely role, especially if you are the single CSO within a healthcare organization. I think as much as possible to try and create a network within your organization, raise awareness of the need, that it isn't just a tick box exercise you know, to produce the documentation. You're creating a culture, you're creating awareness, you're creating behaviors, ensuring, you know, robust processes, comprehensive processes around, for example, your testing documentation, your technology. There's so much we can talk about this for another hour, but and it's so key that again, like your transformation, there is investment and awareness of what is required to be compliant, both on a health organization and a manufacturer side. But we created our strength in numbers with the manufacturers CSO team, and we broadened our team as well, because I think it's really key. We created a lot of robust processes. We helped them develop, they helped us develop. We had a really great collaboration together, met regularly, tried to I think push for change from both sides. We had the same intentions to really just improve the safety of the product itself, and within my team of clinical SMEs, try to upskill them and get them trained as CSOs, especially in the specialist areas such as pharmacy. It's such a high risk area, and some of the other specialty areas like lab and radiology as well. I think it's really key not to just have a single CSO, but to have multiple, especially in those specialized areas such as pharmacy, as I mentioned, oncology and so on. And if possible, I know people may say I live in a dream world, but I think we need to push for what we can push for, and as long as you have a good rationale and try and really raise the awareness of the importance of clinical safety.
And I think that's really interesting, you talking about that, and sort of like it's made me think, coming back to that whole sort of like process. And we've spoken a lot on previous episodes about sort of like needs to be like a substantive post, and you need a CSO, and in an ideal world you need more. But we're not necessarily saying, I think people lose sight of, we're not saying you need hundreds of CSOs that are full-time sort of like in post. But I think lots of organizations don't have proper processes in place. They concentrate on just trying to get stuff done, and don't actually step back and look at the organisation and look at the governance and look at the sort of processes, whether it's around sort of like, the support of design in relation with that, like you said, that collaboration with, with the vendor, with the supplier, and those relationships around sort of like configuration, testing, training, etc., and all of those. If you've got robust processes in place and you've got a team of people to support that, and like you say, that upskilling to become clinical safety officers that can add benefit and support to that process. They don't necessarily need to be, I think we need to get away from this whole sort of like, you're a CSO, so you're doing everything sort of approach, to sort of like, how can we work as a team of subject matter experts, and how can we help each other in relation to what we're doing? There's lots of activities within, as we know, within clinical risk management that can be sort of, delegated and sort of shared out amongst the team. It doesn't have to be sort of like, but we're still seeing this. And I think it's a real shame that, we're still seeing this attitude that it's like, that's your job. So sort of get on with it. And if you're going to get help from elsewhere, you're going to be holding your hand out sort of like that, and it's all going to be very piecemeal. Or organizations that go away and train numerous numbers of people as CSOs and just do nothing with it. And that's really frustrating. That it's like, why have you trained those people then? What was your need to train all of those people? Is it a mandate from somewhere else that someone's saying to you, oh, we need to be seen to, like, and it's just for show, which is absolutely pointless, and doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah, I think you've really kind of hit the nail on the head there. And I think what we tried to do really was, yes, we would advocate, it's not a tick box exercise. As I said too, it is making sure we're adhering to the standards. And, there's a lot to break down within the standards, both, I've worked obviously initially on the health organization side, with DCBO 160, and then obviously, when I left the organization, then working with manufacturers. And I think it's the same on both sides, isn't it? Really, it's absolutely, it can be a single role, but you can divide and conquer. And I think it actually makes more sense to me to, let's upskill, let's train, the people in those specialized areas. Have a team of CSOs, share the load a little bit, divide up the work. You can actually mentor and train, I think, people up quite quickly, when you're working together. Yeah, absolutely. Join forces with the supplier is absolutely optimum, isn't it? So that you can really work together. You can share concerns both sides, share templates. We can help to improve on both sides. Ultimately, everybody is after the same goal, of improving the safety of the product, and it's through many different processes, as you're saying, design. And I think you're having clinicians, the CSOs. You have to be registered, clinician. We're all speaking the same language. From the design, the config, and the testing phase, which are very key, to ensuring safety of the product as well. So I know that is probably getting to utopia that you can have that relationship, but I think absolutely you're not just training CSOs for a reason, but actually you have a plan in place to be compliant, share the load, and actually optimize your product, as well as making sure it's as safe as possible on both sides.
And with all of that in mind, and you've got a plan in place, you've got process in place, you've got the resources available to yourself, is fostering that culture of raising awareness, collaboration, and really important that once those people have been trained, that there is some sort of mentorship and support for those individuals. It's not just about numbers, is it? I know we say about safety in numbers, absolutely, and stuff like that, but it's about doing it the right way, and making sure those people have got support, so that if they are sort of reaching out and saying, I need help, or I don't understand, or I'm not at that level, that someone is there that can sort of then help them out. And it's all about sort of improving their competency and their skill sets in relation to that, because we both know, Catherine, that sort of experienced senior CSOs are like gold dust, and they get hoovered up either into the independent sector or sort of elsewhere quite rapidly sometimes. And that I think definitely within health organisations at the moment, if you look to the landscape and the competency of CSOs, it's probably quite junior across the board. The bigger percentage of CSOs within health organisations, I would say, are quite junior in their roles and don't have that much experience, which is a concern, I think, in that respect. I don't know what your experiences are from your sort of organisations, but
I think it's really interesting, isn't it, when you look back? And I was thinking about this recently around clinical safety, and there are the standards there and the requirements for us to meet. But I think really I think there should be some sort of awareness campaign about that the standards are there, and given, I suppose, equal weight almost. Because really, at the end of the day, at the end of whatever technology we're using, is the patient at the heart of it, and we need to ensure that it is safe from throughout the life cycle of that product. And there is a CSO there, but there's so many factors, I think, that can get in the way of them actually doing their job and improving the safety of the product. And I think it needs to be given the same weight, I think, as almost like an accreditation for a hospital. And I think there needs to be, if an organization or a manufacturer is not compliant with the standards, and really proven, that the product is safe, to issue to HOs or healthcare organizations, and likewise on that side, that they can't go live, that there is penalties for that, and that it has to go through almost an assessment, a body or somebody there, that I think it just needs a little bit of a shake up. And I know recently, very very recently, we it was music to our ears, I think, that they are looking at the standards. And again, great that as CSOs we are given a seat at the table as well for input into that as well, which is so powerful, I think. And it is great to see that that we have the opportunity to contribute to the standards, and what we need to do really to enhance that. And I think part of that should absolutely be a mentorship program, almost a job description, and for it to be very transparent actually what the role does entail, and really give training like we would give a student nurse, give that type of a I suppose we have a framework, we have mentorship throughout the life cycle of your yourself as a junior CSO to an experienced CSO, and you need mentorship. We both need mentorship. We still will pick up the phone and speak to each other. And likewise, there is a great community out there now that has been created from by CSOs for CSOs as well. But there needs to be some formal training and mentorship put in place, and I really do hope as part of this review that is included, and also to have a recognition that there needs to be a professional body regulating CSOs, and maybe an annual competency, for example, that needs to be in place to assess CSOs. I think will be just brainstorming here, but because it isn't it's a role which is, I suppose, can be hard to assess competency because it is complex as well. But I think as a junior CSO, for example, is it fair to assess your competency when you haven't had the adequate mentorship to become competent and confident in your role as well? Because I think we need more than what is maybe currently offered, which is a couple of days of training and a workshop or so, because it's so much more complex, and you need to practice. You need to understand there's a bigger picture. It's not just about writing reports and maintaining hazard logs and risk assessment process. There's so much more to consider, when assessing whether you're working for a manufacturer or for a healthcare organization.
Yeah, and I think having those frameworks in place and having something that's structured in that way will also weed out the imposters. I don't want to say it, and I know there's not sort of like and people will go, how dare you, Dean, sort of like that, say that there is, but there is. Unfortunately, we are in the industry that we're in at the moment, is that there are people out there that aren't necessarily doing the best jobs, and it needs to be regulated, and I'm all for it. And if anyone wants to come to DPM Digital Health and assess our training, our documentation, or I'm happy for people to step in the door and do that. I welcome it for people to come in and have a look at us and what we do, and that's what should be happening. But obviously people say, but there's a cost to that, and where's the resources to do it, etc. It's like, I can just come straight back and say every other industry does it. So you can't sort of sit and say sort of like, if you look at sort of, MHRA, you look at ICO, you look at sort of, the National Cyber Centre and all of those, people are penalised. Organisations get massively fined for, medical devices get taken off of the market in relation to that. Now, I know that's not, and I've, had Dr. sort of Saif Arbed on here talking about it as well. I know it's not practical sometimes. You can't just switch off an EPR within a health organisation, but you can give penalties to that vendor and say to them, you are not, you will not go live with any further sort of like, until you sort this out, and you will be fined in relation to that. And I think it would change the landscape dramatically in relation to that.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think regulation to start with, and then,
Yeah,
absolutely needs regulation and monitoring as well, because I think it's just taking a step back and looking and saying, as you're saying, medical devices are taken off the market if they're not compliant. But actually, we are working with, and there are very complex digital technologies in place, which, maybe haven't had, the assessments or risk assessments done or recently, because it is a continuous process that needs to be done on both sides, by the manufacturer and by the healthcare organization.
yeah, absolutely. And so we're we're in we're in this sort of the healthcare sector that has now, digital health is an established part of our everyday lives. You can't get away from it, can you, in relation to what we do? And the whole environment and the benefits of that in relation to sort of digital transformation. You see that firsthand in relation to how do we sustain that moving forward. It's all well and good us saying, okay, we've got all this digital technology and we've put it in place, we've done our digital transformation, like yay. It's sort of like, our job is done. But that's continuously going to evolve, isn't it, and move forward.
Yeah.
And then we've got a workforce, we've got a community, we've got a population that needs to move forward with that. And how easy is that from your experience to sort of do, and to sort of like, what's your your approach? Sorry, putting you on the spot in
Okay.
in relation to that. I know it's quite heavy, sort of, trying, not expecting, fixing the world in relation to digital transformation.
No, I think that's, you think about, I suppose, digital transformation in the different phases, don't you? You think around pre-implementation, go live, and then I think a lot of organizations see it as that's it, on to the next.
To the next project, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's only 50% of the way there. The next, really, to really make it successful and embed it and ensure that the digital technology is used as it is intended. And I think, obviously there's two sides to it, isn't there? That, when you get to that 50% that you have prepared the site as best as you can, through that engagement, through empowerment, through, for me, really, and kind of in my experience, is really getting a hospital to own the change from leadership to the ground up to leadership as well, to own that change by empowering them, by early exposure, seeing it in action through the formal training, and supporting each other. And, you can take a step back. That's the ideal position, they feel confident on day one, but it's ongoing, isn't it? You can create your network of, we have different titles for these people. You can champions, probably is the most commonly used. People, super users, maybe not fair to people to say. And I know there's other, like, work-based facilitators as well, which is another commonly used term. But there's a network there that people can go to. You have resources in multiple different ways, whether it be your colleagues, whether it be videos, as clinicians, we like to learn in that way as well, and reference guides and manuals as well. But I think from a project point of view is that I think you need to have an adoption and a BAU team in place as well, who are not forgetting about the current live sites. And obviously you will have your support team, from a IT support team as well in place. And I think that's really key as well in preparing sites is, there's IT support, isn't there, for hospitals, and I think it's making sure they're prepared to be able to support and understand if a device isn't working, that actually could be a P1 incident, and making sure there is a backup in place, and that is addressed ASAP, and it's about them understanding as well and improving relationships, because sometimes the relationships between hospital and IT isn't so good pre-implementation, but and making sure that they're prepared to be able to support and vice versa, and encouraging the site to report any issues that they are having, because that can obviously ultimately, enhance the safety, catch any safety incidences and concerns. But the sites do feel supported; they don't feel abandoned after they go live. You're constantly engaging, but very hard to put that on the deployment side of the project team. That we need to have a BAU team, and there needs to be people from adoption, and that should be, in my opinion, seeing it work really well and makes almost the same as I suppose a good structure in an EPR team, deployment team, and a BAU team, and an adoption and support team, is having that mix, or like a hospital structure, having a good, wide, broad clinical expertise, non-clinical. You're having your technical support in place as well, that they can go on site and frequently on site, engaging with the end users. Having end user forums, listening to them, I think is really key. Bringing that back, speaking with the vendor, speaking with the development team within the project, and developing from the end users. And we have to continuously do that throughout the life cycle, of the product, to ensure. And if there are, say for example, there's people are having difficulty in regards to technical, we need to take that forward and improve it going forward, and learn our lessons, really capture and learn lessons from every single go live, whether it be one or 40 go lives, that we continuously improve and learn from each go live, and learn from, our previous, the areas that didn't go so well. And obviously the things that do go well, we'll continue to do those well going forward. But it's only halfway there at go live, in my opinion, in my experience. That again, investment is key, that we have to have a BAU and support and adoption team there to continuously engage with the sites, ensure that they are complying and using the system. And they are the experts, because they're using the system day in, day out. They know what works well. They know where the pain points are. They know where they can improve efficiency and safety, where there are gaps, because they're so key for development. And in previous roles, we used to hold monthly end user forums, where you can bring, and it shouldn't be the first time either that you're bringing, your theatre managers together, that they should be organically developing relationships before, if, actually that they can go and see this in action at a previous site, that they should have that organic. And that just fosters, I think, actually outside of the EPR, for example, or whatever you're trying to do, an organic relationship. They can pick up the phone and talk, about, hey, we're doing this new surgery, can you help me out? And, just so many things. A little support network, because, as being maybe a head of department, or, hospital director, or a matron, or, director of clinical services, it can be a lonely world. But if you can support and foster and facilitate relationship building amongst a big organization, and use the EPR, I always say, this is our opportunity right now to do a lot of things, and it's a catalyst for change, not only moving from paper over to technology, but it's a catalyst for change, and it's an opportunity to change things maybe that you haven't been able to change before. And like, it opens doors, for our hospitals to the wider organization, and to foster relationships and feel like you aren't alone. There are people that have gone through this previously, and you can open up the doors for them to learn from each other and help each other out throughout the journey. That you don't treat this as something that's never been done before. Actually, there are people out there that have gone through it, and it's really key, I think, to develop and encourage that support network amongst the peers.
And I think it's like you said, it's inviting those people that have gone before to reach out to everybody else, and using my sort of like my experience before, when I was talking to the sort of like the elective team and stuff, and it shouldn't be the case where you have to sort of get permission off someone to speak to someone else, one of your colleagues, about their experiences with a system that they're using. It's like, you should be able to just pick a phone up and say, can I come across and sort of see it? And they go, yeah, of course you can. And sort of like, but we sometimes, don't we, there's this sort of almost this layer of sort of awkwardness, or sort of like, within, that is like, oh, I haven't spoken to so and so about that, or I haven't got permission, or if so and so finds out, I'm gonna get it. And it's like, what? Why is there this air of sort of, suspicion in relation to that? And interestingly, you talking about absolutely key, the whole user communities. And I get really shocked sometimes when I speak to some sort of well-established manufacturers, and I say to them, "Oh, so what do your user groups look like?" And they go, "We don't have them." And I'm like, "Sorry, what do you mean you don't have user groups?" "Oh, we don't have user groups." And I'm just like, why? Why? Do you know what I mean? How can you not have user groups? How do
Yeah.
you how do you get? That's the whole point of being, informed, yeah, about sort of, your sort of ongoing development and post, sort of, whether you call it post market surveillance or post monitor, post deployment monitoring, etc. It's absolutely key to sort of the success of a product being successful. And I just sort of, it just baffles me, because it's
Yeah,
how you move forward, isn't it? It's how you sort of, like,
absolutely. Yeah.
things should evolve. Yeah,
I think
crazy.
it seems so obvious that that's
Yeah, it
what
does, doesn't it?
say let's talk about the manufacturer scenario, that they would engage with the end users and with the experts.
Yeah,
And sometimes with manufacturers, I haven't seen this, thankfully, so much, but they don't have, as I said, that like for like, as in nurses developing what they should be developing from the manufacturer side, and then speaking with end users, whether it be in the informatics team or actually going to a hospital and getting feedback and from the end users. But it does seem obvious that that would be the likely path that a manufacturer would take. But sometimes it can be a little bit shocking that that isn't, it isn't what I don't think it would happen in any other industry, to be honest. And such a high risk industry, you would imagine that that is an absolute, mandatory requirement.
but I think there's a few things. I mean, you say, it wouldn't happen in any other industry. I think there's quite a lot of things within digital health that we could say the same. Oh, it wouldn't happen in other industries. You take the sort of, like, the figures for, patient safety incidents, just generally within the UK. And if you then sort of, like, I think it was about 11,000 last year, that caused harm to patients. But if you then add, and that's just patient safety incidents, not digital health.
Yeah.
But I think myself and Clive Flashman, when he came on, we equated it to something like, a plane a day falling out the sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in that industry, if that was happening, every single plane in the
Yeah.
world would be grounded within, like that. You know, so it's just odd, isn't it, that there are probably incidents going on as we speak. There is
Yeah.
someone coming to harm in relation to the delivery of care, and yet we don't seem to pay as much attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I remember listening to that episode and thinking, that I think ties in with creating, doesn't it, more wider awareness. And, I think the review of the standards can really help with that, and having our, us at the table,
Yeah,
us being the CSO community at the table, to really say, look, and giving figures like that are really, really powerful. And actually, when comparing to the industries like, the aviation industry, and recently, unfortunately, seeing the accidents that have happened and how that equates with people that actually, it's almost the untold stories, isn't it? And, that we really need to, get in line with industries that, have the potential, like aviation, to cause harm. And, unfortunately, what it can result in, but actually it can be very preventable very quickly if we can get the support behind it. And hopefully this review can really contribute and help, and we can come together as CSOs and really be a force for that change that is really required. I think, and it's quite timely, and it should happen sooner rather than later.
no, absolutely, and yeah, looking forward to that, and hopefully being part of that focus group, and fingers crossed, you never know, part of the working group as well to sort of to make some of those changes. Catherine, lastly, I just want to come on to sort of like before we sort of wrap up, is, you know, if you could give us some sort of insight into, you know, what it's like, you know, leading sort of from a leadership perspective in digital health, because you are a leader in relation to digital transformation, and sort of, you know, with a team of sort of clinical subject matter experts, and how have you approached that in relation to your role, and I suppose what have been the challenges for you in relation to that?
So a really good question. I think, again, always coming back to the same thing, I'm like a broken record, is resource. I think is, you know, I think it's making it clear to the organization, you know, from my perspective, when I took over as the clinical lead for a national EPR implementation project, is, I suppose, through the experience I've had to date, is throughout that wise, that I knew that our clinical team, you know, we required more experts really in the field. And I thought, okay, well, you know, how could I best support the hospitals, you know, through preparing them for implementation, development of the project, and post go live, obviously, as well, deployment phase, and then, you know, that adoption and ongoing support as well. So I thought, why not build a team like you have in a hospital, for example, just say with me as the director of nursing or matron, and then having those heads of departments, so SMEs being the equivalent within your team. So that's what I presented, and fortunate enough, that's how we built the team. And having an expert really, you know, in, I suppose, for surgical services, theatre, nursing and allied health, lab, radiology, and then having, I think as well is really key, is having a business analyst in place as well. Totally. And, you know, that can really, I think it's really key, isn't it, as you go, you know, not every single hospital, even within a big organization, is going to be the same. You have a core product. You really need to analyze the as-is processes of those sites to kind of root out, as you say. You referred, I think, back earlier in the episode around, you know, you don't want to get to a place in day one of go live where a department really hasn't been fully assessed and, you know, hasn't been engaged with, or a service, for example, or a specialist nurse, for example, and that you really want to make sure that every stone is unturned and every process is really, you know, the journey is, you know, end to end is, you know, walked through the as is, and then the to be as well, and the staff are prepared and trained and know what their role is going to be on day one of go live. I think it's also key, you know, to support our medical colleagues as well. And, you know, if possible within an organization, to have a medic on the project to engage, you know, and understand their needs, because they're wide and broad and varied as well. And, you know, not only say, you know, if you're in a private organization, you know, understanding our consultants from our medical consultants, you know, our anaesthetists or radiologists or surgeons, right down to then, you know, they're, you know, our visitors to our house, let's say, but actually, you know, what support we can give to our house doctors as well, and, you know, how we can capture their needs ahead of time, you know, and using the technology to build their templates and, you know, their order sets, and standardize, you know, the templates, you know, from say, for example, if you're doing, you know, pathways, or, you know, looking at, say, for example, a total knee pathway, that we can, it's a challenge, but, you know, as much as possible, we can standardize that journey for the patient, and standardize the care, as you spoke earlier, you know, putting in, you know, links to guidance and references within the EPR as well is really, really helpful. But, you know, I think really, I suppose the challenges in managing, I think, the clinical SMEs, I think a key is to recruit, I suppose, your team at the same level. So, you know, that they're coming in, I think, with that same experience, they're able to, if I'm recruiting, say, for example, at a head of department level, that level, really, people are able, they're self-motivated, they're disciplined. I don't have to worry about them working independently. You don't need to micromanage. It's not really my style. You trust people, you let them off. They're independently working day to day anyway. They're managing staff, they're managing conflict, difficult situations, and so on. And that comes hand in hand with digital transformation, and they know how to work with people and manage people. And I think that, again, that is key to our journeys, isn't it? And they do, have experience in some sort of change and transformation, whether it be small, whether it be large, as well. And I think it's just really to support them, to listen. I don't need to be an expert in the area of laboratory, because I have an expert there. And actually, if you're working in a big organization, you have multiple experts there that you can refer to, and the different specialities within nursing, such as oncology, cardiology, and so on, is that we can liaise and bring on board those SMEs and the experts as needed, to help us and support us throughout that journey. And I think if we all work collaboratively together and constantly engage with our end users, really foster good relationships as well with our supplier and our vendor, and obviously have our really good processes in place. Work smart, not hard, I think, as well. Developing tools such as pre-deployment, toolkits and questionnaires that we can obtain information, get to understand our sites ahead of implementation. Prepare our leadership executive teams with handbooks, with a journey. Empower them with the knowledge and the skills as well, to allow them to lead from the front and support their teams, and that we can be there in the background supporting them, but really allow them to own the change. I think, in my opinion, has really, if I look back and reflect, is that's where the real success stories come at, go live. And for me, the most important phase is that adoption and maintenance phase, and the business as usual phase, where it's embedded and it's used to its optimum as well. The safety features are really, embraced and used, and, obviously then you can really reap the rewards, can't you, of, and improving outcomes for patients, because obviously at the other end of it is our reports and our data and our dashboards and our business intelligence, that you can pull from an EPR that can really improve outcomes, for our patients, and ultimately for their health and for the population also.
Totally. Catherine, we can sit here and talk for at least another 2 hours. I guarantee you, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And this has been absolute gold dust. We've discussed lots of things, but as with all of my guests, before we go, I always ask this of them: if there is one takeaway that you can sort of give to our audience in relation to what we've spoken about. I know this is putting you on the spot again. What would that be in relation to sort of digital health and that journey?
I think maybe a few messages to different audiences. If I was to say to leaders, if you're in leadership teams or organizations, is really invest. Talk to others who have been on this journey before. Invest upfront, and maybe try and standardize your processes and your documentation before. And I think from a clinical safety point of view, again, invest in, not one, but if you can, CSOs, but actually, creating and fostering that team, mentorship, invest in such comprehensive training like DPM offer as well, to really support and mentor CSOs and develop them, to be able, give them the tools to be able to do the job and ensure the safety of the product is really, really key for me.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. Catherine, thank you ever so much for joining us on episode 20 of The Only Way is Ethics. It's been an absolute pleasure having you join us.
Thanks, Dean. Really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
And just to say to everyone out there, again, thank you for listening and joining us. A quick reminder again, we are on YouTube and Spotify, and we look forward to the next episode in 2025. Thanks again, Catherine.
Thanks, Dean.